Good morning. So, yesterday we talked about how you can't control everything. And one of the things that achievers try and do is they try to start to control everything in their life, especially if you get older and you start to get some success. Successful people can fall into this trap of, I got to control everything that happens. You know, they get worried about safety, they get worried about the safety of their family. And instead of expanding and instead of growing, they start contracting. And remember, you're either growing or you're dying. So in life, we're either growing, and if we're growing, the key to happiness is progress. The key to happiness is doing the next thing. So if all of a sudden you become super conservative and super worried about safety and super worried about all of these things, that's not to say that you should be haphazard, but if that's all that you focus on, then you're not going to be growing, you're going to be dying, and you're not going to feel like you're successful, you're not going to feel like you're doing the most that you can do. So what can we control? Well, let's remember that the only thing that we can really ever control is our response to whatever happens. We can impact events, we can impact people, we can influence for sure, and we should try. We should absolutely try to do those things, but at the end of the day, there are certain things we simply aren't going to be able to control. The weather, it's an overused example now, but COVID. It is a great example. You could have everything set and ready to go, but if timing is wrong, you could have had the best restaurant in the world ready to go 2 years ago, and it didn't matter. And it didn't matter your location. It didn't matter the type of the restaurant. It didn't matter your staff. It didn't matter your cook. None of that mattered because you were going to be shut down. And so your response to that is the only thing that you could actually control. You controlled your location, you controlled your staff, you trained everybody, you had everything going great guns, and then all of a sudden, bam, everything shut down. Tillman Fertitta is a guy that owns the Houston Rockets, and he owns a ton of hotels, he owns a ton of restaurants, high-end chains like Morton's Steakhouse. And he even owns amusement parks and aquariums is what he had gotten into. So think about all the things that guy owns, and he was flying high. He's completely self-made. He was flying high right before 2020, and then every business that he had got shut down. He didn't have any business that was critical and that was able to keep going. So his entire empire got shut down. So then he had to figure out, okay, how do I pivot? How do I pivot and try to make that happen? So remember, as you're going through all of this, that we want to be growing. If we're not growing, we're dying. And that we can't control events. We can control our response to those events. And that's what achievers and that's what people as we get a little bit older in life have to always remember. We can't control what our kids are going to do. We can't control what our grandkids are going to do. We can't control what outside forces are going to hit us or hit them. But we can control our response to those things. And when we focus on that, when we focus on our response, that's where you can find true freedom, because then you can realize I can control how I feel about all of this stuff. And when I control how I feel, then I control how I act. And when I control how I act, then my response to these events is going to be significantly more positive as opposed to negative. If you focus on that I'm going to be frustrated, that it wasn't the result that it was supposed to be, that this isn't the outcome that I wanted, well, then your response is going to come out of frustration and anger and resentment. And guess what? Your response is not going to be nearly as lovely as the response that comes out of a place of growth. So always remember what you can control, and that's your response to what happens. There's this moment of decision. And Stephen Covey talked about the gap. There's a gap between when a stimulus happens, when an event happens, and when you respond. And it's in that gap that your life is decided. Tony Robbins talks about it's in the moment of decision that your destiny is created. He's all about destiny technologies. So he says that moment of decision in between when something happens and your response, that's really where your destiny is decided. How eloquently can you do that response is going to be determined by how well you can control your emotions and control your response to that particular event. If you do that elegantly and gracefully, well, then your response is going to be that way and your life is going to end up being that way. If you don't, if you do it from a place of fear or anger or hurt, well, then your life is going to be reflective of that same thing. So as we move forward through all of this, always remember, the response to what happens is what you can control, and that's what you should focus on. And if you do, the quality of your life is going to be significantly different than if you don't. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day. We're all in this together. Let's take care of each other.